Welcome to Hannity. And breaking tonight, the State Department has now, at this hour, just issued a security alert telling all Americans in Afghanistan to immediately leave the gates surrounding Karzai International Airport as the situation now in Afghanistan remains dire. Thousands of Americans and our allies remain trapped behind enemy lines. The situation is deteriorating by the hour.
The Taliban, whether we like it or not, is in control, largely in control of the country, certainly in control of the city of Kabul.
I don't know why people and everybody, they are hiding. They are hiding the reality of the Taliban.
I wanted to encourage the president to stay longer, but he has to, as I say, weigh the equities of the danger versus the advantage, and I trust his judgment.
What are you telling those Americans? And maybe they're not in Kabul, but they're somewhere in Afghanistan. How will they get out?
I'm in contact with my friends, I'm in contact with my family, and every one of us, we are so worried, and we have no idea what will happen after August 31st.
We're on the cusp, Harris, of having the biggest mass hostage situation in American history. It's going to make 1979 in Tehran look like a sleepover.
How many individuals on terror watch lists have been screened or found at any of the screening points, either in Qatar, Ramstein, or in the U.S.?
I don't know. If you believe we left Afghanistan, we've ended the war between the U.S. and radical Islam, you're a fool.
Americans held hostage behind enemy lines. Day 11.
Americans held hostage beyond enemy lines, day 11. And yesterday, the Biden administration, they promised to give you, America, an accurate number of how many Americans are still trapped. But today, no such luck. And depending on who you talk to at the State Department, as many as 4,000 Americans are still trying to get out, or according to Anthony Blinken, it could be 1,500, plus or minus a few dozen here and there. In other words, they still have absolutely no idea, not a clue. Now, this is critical information. We need an accurate count desperately. Any American in Afghanistan after August the 31st, that is this coming Tuesday, will be left behind enemy lines and subjected or subjugated to the whims of brutal terrorists. Ostensibly, yes, they will be hostages. And today, when one NBC reporter asked Biden what he will do if Americans are still in Afghanistan after the Taliban's deadline that he said he agreed to, Biden responded with a joke: "You'll be the first person I call. You decide if it's funny." Not particularly funny to me, considering how dire things have become. The president answered 0 questions, as per usual, doesn't want to get in trouble after that, and said nothing about the crisis, not one word, in Afghanistan. He had more important things to do, by the way, like touting the $5 trillion in reckless spending instead of being fully focused on fixing this mess in Afghanistan that he himself created. Biden's Secretary of State, meanwhile, noted that there were no concrete plans for evacuating people after August 31st, other than certain diplomatic efforts and economic assistance. I wonder if we call that ransom. Take a look.
Your question.
Is there any concrete steps
yes, I'm sorry.
that you can give to people who are very worried right now, understandably, about whether they're just going to be forgotten, left behind, disappeared once the United States withdraws its military and can no longer protect their safe passage to the airport or, their other livelihoods?
Yeah. The short answer is no, they will not be forgotten. And as I said, we will use every diplomatic, economic assistance tool at our disposal, working hand in hand with the international community.
All military will be gone, so we have diplomatic and economic assistance as our tools to use to get Americans free if they're left behind. In other words, the grand master plan post-August the 31st. Let's beg and bribe the Taliban, pay a ransom to release anyone still held hostage behind enemy lines, which is pretty much what we're now doing, except after August the 31st, our military will be completely evacuated. The airport will be in total control of the Taliban, and anyone left behind will have no way out. Why? Because of Joe Biden our people, our fellow citizens, quite literally, will be at the mercy of Taliban terrorists. Biden ignored one warning after another as the country literally collapsed before the world's eyes. Multiple sources telling me tonight the CIA, they pulled out 6 or 7 weeks ago, and to their credit, they were telling Joe Biden exactly what was happening on the ground. They did not mince words. And by the way, we are told, our sources, so did the Department of Defense. Joe Biden completely ignored them, and the way he has been characterizing it to you, the American people, is completely at odds with the intelligence that he was being given. Look at your screen, and those papers will come out one day. He ignored their warnings. Look at May in Afghanistan when the Taliban began their offensive. He ignored, notice the red, it starts to take over. Then in June, after the Taliban took control of dozens of provinces, what happened to this great Afghan army that Joe Biden was bragging about? He ignored their warnings in July. Look at the map in July, when the Taliban controlled the vast majority of the country and were on the march. We still had control of Kabul. We could have seen what was happening and acted immediately. And we could have logistically, safely extracted every American and our equipment, which I'll get to in a minute. In fact, just as the Taliban was closing in, Biden closed Bagram Air Base. By the way, the Trump plan would have kept that in our possession. And so by August, it was too late, game over, nor did he want to come back from his vacation. Our embassy was abandoned. He stayed on vacation. Thousands of additional American troops had to be sent back to Kabul, even though we saw this all coming, just to secure the airport, which is now our only way out of the country. Well, there's one problem with that. The Taliban, they control the entire perimeter of the airport with all their checkpoints, and they alone decide who will get to the airport. But according to Joe Biden, this was always going to happen. There was never a way out that's not chaotic. Yes, there was. His hands were tied, he said, and he planned for every scenario. That seems to be a lie also. Nothing could be further from the truth. This all could have been prevented easily. You don't have to take my words for it. Just listen to President Trump. This is way back in 2017. He ran on the pledge that he wanted to get us out of there as quickly as possible. Take a look.
The consequences of a rapid exit are both predictable and unacceptable. 9/11, the worst terrorist attack in our history, was planned and directed from Afghanistan because that country was ruled by a government that gave comfort and shelter to terrorists. A hasty withdrawal would create a vacuum that terrorists, including ISIS and al-Qaeda, would instantly fill, just as happened before September 11th.
Remember, not a single American was killed in the last 18 months of the Trump presidency, around 18 months. And that was even after he made the deal with the Taliban. And guess what? They weren't on the march then because they believed and feared Donald Trump. President Trump was right in 2017. Joe Biden was wrong. And now, thanks to Biden's half-baked withdrawal plan, thousands of people, it's guaranteed at this point, they will sadly die. Afghans that assisted us will die. And Americans everywhere are less safe. In less than 6 days, anyone left in Afghanistan who assisted the United States or the Afghan government, along with their families, will be killed by the Taliban. It's already happening, according to reports. And America left behind the entire database, now in the Taliban's possession. They will all be hunted down, and when they are caught, they will be murdered, and Joe Biden is the person you can blame. And think about this. Many of them will be murdered with the very weapons that Joe Biden didn't make preparations to bring home or destroy. At the very least, I would have brought them home. A reported $83 billion worth of weapons that you paid for. That includes, get this, 75,000 armored vehicles. Get this, 208 Black Hawk helicopters and other aircraft. $200 million worth of drones. We gave them our drones. 600,000 military-grade guns and other weapons. And let's not forget the thousands of night vision goggles, uniforms, bulletproof vests, other protective gear. And then to top it off, the Taliban even has access now to biometrics data left behind. That means for any Afghan or anyone that assisted U.S. forces over the past 20 years, they will be told, look into this computer. And if there's a match, that person will die. And then to top it all off, al-Qaeda is very much alive and well, in spite of what Joe Biden and others are saying in Afghanistan. And they are working hand in hand with their brothers in the Taliban. They will likely have access to some of these weapons. And now a safe haven to plan future attacks, likely against us as their #1 target. This is our intel capabilities have been shattered, although in all credit to the CIA and our intelligence community, they did warn Biden. The CIA pulled back, according to my sources, and they warned in great detail exactly what would happen. My understanding is there is a paper trail. Now there'll be people that will be left there. We will be left safe here at home, just 20 years after 9/11. Operation Enduring Freedom has now, under Joe Biden, become Operation Tyranny and Death. But Joe Biden doesn't seem to be bothered. Thousands of Americans, our friends, hopelessly trapped behind enemy lines. And right now, I guess, as Joe Biden sleeps ever so peacefully at the White House, not a care in the world. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.